Yep, alive.
Great. This is the ordinary meeting of the Council on the 26th of October 2021, held via remote technology. I now hand you over to our CEO, Dr. Rosemary Dillon.
Good evening, councillors. Welcome to this ordinary meeting of the Blue Mountains City Council. This meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed. An audio file and a link to a live stream is available from the council's website. The audio recording will be available on the website for 6 months after the upload date. As all statements made at this meeting will be recorded, your image and voice may be recognised and other people may be aware that you have attended the meeting. Your continued attendance at the meeting after this statement is made is taken as your consent to your image and voice being webcast. All persons in attendance at this meeting, whether addressing the council or making comments that may be detected by the recording equipment, should refrain from making any defamatory comments or from releasing any personal or confidential information about another individual without the other individual's consent. The council is not responsible for any statements of any individual made during this meeting. Any defamatory statements or any statements which include personal or confidential information are the sole responsibility of the individual who makes them. The council's code of meeting practice sets standards of conduct for a council meeting. If any person in attendance at the meeting acts in a disorderly manner, or if a person makes defamatory or unacceptable comments, then the meeting may be interrupted by the Mayor or by me, the Chief Executive Officer, and appropriate action taken. This meeting must not be recorded by any party other than the council. Members of the public have been invited to provide submissions to items on the meeting's agenda in advance. Any submissions received have been provided to the councillors. I now ask you to please welcome the Mayor.
Dear God, we sincerely seek your blessing on this council so that its deliberations may advance your glory and the true welfare of the people of the City of Blue Mountains. The City of Blue Mountains is located within the country of the Darug and Gundungurra peoples. The Blue Mountains City Council recognises that Darug and Gundungurra traditional owners have a continuous and deep connection to their country. This is of great cultural significance to Aboriginal people, both locally and in the region. For Darug and Gundungurra people, Ungara takes in everything within the physical, cultural and spiritual landscape. Landforms, waters, air, trees, rocks, plants, animals, foods, medicines, minerals, stories and special places. It includes cultural practice, kinship, knowledge, songs and art, as well as spiritual beings and people, past, present and future. Blue Mountain City Council pays respect to elders, past and present, while recognising the strength, capacity and resilience of past and present Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Blue Mountains region. Good evening. I don't believe we have any apologies tonight. We have a full contingent. I'll table the minutes of the ordinary meeting of 28 September 2021. It's moved Councillor Vanderklees, seconded Councillor Fell to true record. I'll put that. All those in favour, against, declare it carried unanimously. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations to be made? Councillor Hollywood.
Sorry. Yes, I'd like to make a declaration of interest in relation to Merrill Minute, which is item 1. And that is that I'm a member of the National Parks and Wildlife Advisory Council as a local government New South Wales representative. It's a non-pecuniary, non-significant interest, and I will be staying in the room for that item.
Thank you. It's noted. Any further declarations? There being none, I'll ask Councillor Hollywood to mute, please. And I will repair to Mayoral Minute number 1, about which we've just spoken.
I have a question.
Councillor Brown with a question.
On Mayoral Minute number 1, access for dogs.
You can wait till I've spoken and address your question when I have a mover and seconder.
It's actually a question regarding really a point of order.
Well, you can wait till it's moved and seconded, and after I've spoken to it, I'll take your point of order. Okay, it's moved by myself and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Councillors, I've received a lot of complaints and concerns from people who have been attacked or confronted by dogs in both the national parks and also on council bushland. There's been a strong request from the community for us to work with national parks around improving signage. It's widely recognised that companion animals can, on occasion, have an adverse impact on wildlife as well. But what drove this mayoral minute was attacks on people. Council and New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service both have regulations that sit beneath the Companion Animals Act and apply to companion animals in the respective estates, so our land and their land. Our powers can serve to protect both wildlife, but also, as I say, what drives this mayoral minute, members of the public. So what we're seeking here is for council and national parks to work together to come up with some common strategies and signage in particular that will at least alert people to the fact that there are restrictions on companion animals in parks. As I say, what drives this is a large number of complaints, particularly during the COVID lockdown period, from members of the public who were confronted by dogs in the park. Does a seconder wish to speak? No. Councillor Brown on a point of order. You're on mute, Councillor Brown.
The point of order has sort of been superseded. My question is really why this is a mayoral minute. It's not that it isn't a matter to be considered, but what makes it urgent and not something that could go through the normal process?
A member of the public being attacked by a dog in the park, who was the third one during lockdown in the last few weeks.
Is that in the national park?
Yes.
So on that basis, the
Councillor Brown, there's no point of order. Do you wish to speak to the mayoral minute?
Yes, I will. Look, I mean, of course, I think we're all aware of the issue of people not keeping their dogs on leash. I suppose what puzzles me about this is I think that National Parks is well aware of the issue, and we also have the issue. I mean, in many ways, there's more our areas of bushland, our reserves, the gully, of course, being one of the examples. So we have a problem ourselves where we are not really managing the dogs off leash when they shouldn't be and not in control when they should be. I would have preferred something like this to come where we get, if there has been these attacks and so on, just to have more information about that. But I'm not sure what we're suggesting the National Park should do when we actually have to look after our own areas, because they're the border country, if you like, where most people walk their dogs, which is all our little walking tracks and lookouts. And from my point of view, I would actually, if anything, like us to be focusing on whether we need to resource more rangers. I feel for a long time that's been an issue, that we are not really, we don't have the people on the ground that we need. So it's not that I'm necessarily opposed to this, but I feel the focus, we probably should be focusing more on our own turf, so to speak.
Thank you. Anything further? Just before I take Councillor Hollywood, and I'm surprised there's further speeches on it, but before I take Councillor Hollywood, who has got an interest in this matter, I apologise. I just, in relation to Councillor Brown's last speech, I just refer councillors to point to, and the words work together to improve community awareness of the impacts of wildlife. Pertains to both our land and parks land. But anyway, worth reading the motion. Councillor Hollywood.
Yes, thank you. And unlike some other councillors, I actually welcome you bringing forward this mayoral minute. And I think it is a really important issue, and for council to work together with national parks is really important. What I would say is that I spend a lot of time in the national parks around here, and what I would say is that there is a growing increase of people taking, locals and tourists, bringing their dogs into national parks. It's not something that 20 years ago you would see there was good awareness of the fact that dogs are banned from national parks because their scent affects the wildlife and the movement of wildlife, and not just mammals, reptiles as well. So out of respect for our wildlife and out of respect for our national parks, I really welcome this mayoral minute. I do think it is an issue that we need to look at greater community education with national parks and with our council rangers. But it's broader because of the fact that we have many tourists visiting our national parks as well. I mean, I see signs across the community that are into national parks with the graffitied out. The only section that is graffitied out is, in fact, the no dog sign. I have also been not attacked by dogs, but verbally abused by humans when I've suggested that they take their dog out of the national park in a very gentle and respectful way. So I do think this is actually an emerging and major issue. We are custodians and advocates for a city and a World Heritage area. I absolutely support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Hollywood. When you said you're abused by humans, I was hoping you weren't referring to our last Labor meeting. Are there any further speeches on this, I would have thought, uncontentious matter? No? Good. There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 2 is moved by me and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. It relates to Warragamba Dam EIS and us making a submission to it. I laughingly refer to the EIS as an EIS because it looks more like a brochure, propounding the raising of the dam wall. We have, as a local government, consistently opposed the raising of Warragamba Dam wall. And I spoke to a public meeting the other night in Wallandilly. One of the most significant moments of my time in public life was when I received a message from Kazan Brown saying that what I had to say brought her to tears. She is a traditional owner and she is confronting the loss of all cultural heritage sites in the Kadumba catchment as a result of this proposal. The devastation of cultural heritage proposed by this, or that would be posed by this proposition, is not just appalling, it's offensive, and it runs counter to any sense of reconciliation, and it compounds decades, indeed a couple of centuries of trauma that's been caused post-colonisation. This is Aboriginal people, in this case Gundungurra people, trying desperately to hold on to cultural heritage, and for the state government to propose to inundate it and destroy it completely within this catchment just to enable the overdevelopment of the floodplain is simply unacceptable. Storm, if you'd start the clock, that would be good. So we've consistently opposed this, and the raising of the dam wall will result in temporary inundation of significant areas upstream of the catchment, which includes the Blue Mountains World Heritage or areas of the Blue Mountains World Heritage National Park. It's not that it will be invisible, it will be quite visible from various very well-known lookouts in the Blue Mountains. The water isn't stored, it doesn't add to water storage. Effectively what happens is a wave comes in and a wave goes out. It's allowed to ebb away, leaving behind it destruction. And what was once pristine World Heritage area is reduced to mudflats. That is the outcome of this process. This has the potential to have significant adverse impacts on biodiversity values, including a number of threatened species, and I include in that list the critically endangered regent honeyeater and major subpopulations of the Camben white gum, which is located in the beautiful Kadumba Valley. As I say, this proposal has significant effects on World Heritage values itself. UNESCO has indicated that World Heritage listing could indeed be reviewed if this goes ahead, and that will have an economic impact on the Blue Mountains. My proposition in this mayoral minute is that as part of our ongoing advocacy in opposition to this appalling indeed disgraceful proposition is that we make a strong submission as a council in the EIS process, and that at the same time this mayoral minute encourages members of the community to make their own submissions directly, and our council will publish that request and promote it across the city via our own platforms. As a community, we need to stand up. We need to stand up for cultural values. We need to stand up for the World Heritage Area. We need to stand up for flora and fauna put at risk by this proposal. This madness for overdevelopment and this crushing desire to develop the floodplain at the risk of one of the most pristine areas of wilderness in the country is unutterably appalling. And on that basis, we should continue our strong push to do what we can to save this precious area of which we are custodians. Does the seconder wish to speak?
No, Mr. Mayor, you've said it all.
Okay. Do any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brown.
Yes, I completely agree. I think it's extraordinary that we had things like, is it the Yukon Gorge with the Rio Tinto blowing up 46,000-year-old sacred sites, and that was considered a terrible thing after the fact, of course, and the chairman resigned over it. And yet the government is going to do a very similar thing here with Aboriginal heritage. And I think when you think about Notre Dame Cathedral, and I think they raised $1 billion or something when that burned. But of course, it's got nothing like the history and age of the heritage that's going to be destroyed. So it is breathtaking, really. I think also, and obviously this is another part of what's so concerning, is that the insurers themselves have said this, the peak insurance body has said this is not the solution to flooding. In fact, it's adding to the risk. And I think that's really important too, that the government is planning on this massive development on floodplains that are still going to be at risk, because that's not the only direction the water comes from and the flooding comes from. So it just seems so incredibly irresponsible. Governor Macquarie warned against this, that people must not build on the floodplains. And here we have a government doing it. So it seems so willful, it's very hard to even grasp what's really driving it. So I support it very strongly. I assume that the fact that we haven't said the submission will be opposing it is because that's a given, that position is already established. But thank you for bringing this to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Brown, and thank you for your support. And yes, the submission will be informed by the opposition expressed in previous resolutions of this council. Thank you very much for your contribution. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Hollywood has the call.
I promise I will keep it very short. I just wanted to acknowledge the work of the Colin Foundation, and that I took this out of my mailbox yesterday, which basically just says, would you flood this? And I want to acknowledge the Gundungurra land that is behind me, and that is the view looking down the Kadumba Valley from Wentworth Falls, where you will actually see the damage of flooding into the Kadumba Valley. So I just want to acknowledge that's what actually sits behind me through these Zoom meetings. And I thank the work, the advocacy, and also acknowledge the work of the staff through a huge EIS process in terms of responding. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hollywood. And thanks to the IT we're using, Councillor Hoare emerges like an apparition on screen, or should I say Councillor Hoare? Councillor Hoare, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll keep my remarks mercifully brief. Of course, I feel extraordinarily passionate about this issue, but I commend your words. I think you've really covered it all. Other than to say, well, in addition to adding my thanks to Councillor Hollywood's, to the outstanding work of the Colong Foundation and everyone who's been involved with their efforts, Also want to acknowledge the tremendous community grassroots effort that is rising up to generate submissions, and was proud to stand around in Springwood Town Centre on Saturday adjacent to the Give a Damn campaigners. We'd just like to wind up in conclusion by pointing out, friends, that we only have until the 29th of November to get a submission. That's 35 days, a few days before the council elections. So if you haven't made a submission, please take the time to lodge one through the planning portal and get one in. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hua. I would note that the time frame for submissions is fairly short. Our Director Environment is on the screen, and I hesitate to say this, but I imagine he would probably provide more time in consultation for a duplex than we're getting for the World Heritage Area of the Blue Mountains, and I wish he were in charge, because this wouldn't be a risk. Councillors, is there any other contribution that needs to be made? There being none, there's one matter before us. I'll put it, all those in favour? Against? I declare it carried unanimously, and thank all councillors. Mayoral Minute number 3 is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Brendan Christie, and it relates to the standard instrument governing temporary events in the Blue Mountains. And can I say that this has had an impact in Ward 4, with complaints having been made about the operation of Glenbrook markets, and the standard instrument affording us very little flexibility, although I am confident, although not involved in VA processes, that our staff will find a way forward, and the goodwill from all sides will see a satisfactory compromise arise. But local events, such as the Glenbrook markets or community markets more generally across the mountains, small-scale cultural events are very important to a community like the Blue Mountains. As you all know, they provide economic activity, but they also provide social connections, and they develop, I think, a strong sense of community. Events like this after the COVID lockdown, after bushfires and things like that are particularly important, where people can come together as part of this community that we all celebrate so strongly. And the importance of such events to a community like the Blue Mountains, I would submit on that basis, is even greater now as we emerge from yet another lockdown, as well as the impacts of bushfire and flooding, which we haven't really had a chance to shake ourselves free of in the time that's elapsed since. Now, the planning system, as I say, plays a key role in ensuring that these events can occur. The state government has identified the planning system is an important lever to respond to recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. It's actively introduced a suite of reforms to accelerate productivity and economic movement. Now, at the local level, one of the best things the state government could do to support local activity in a place like the Blue Mountains is to help support and facilitate local community and cultural events. What this Mayoral Minute does is it asks us to write to the Minister, the Honourable Rob Stokes MP, and draw his attention to the standard temporary use control and its detrimental effect as a provision on local events in the Blue Mountains, and ask for the introduction of some flexibility, particularly at a time like this. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I believe you've covered almost everything, but just to highlight how much the Glenbrook markets, as an example, are loved by our community. A petition I've started has received over 800 signatures in just 1 week. And that's including with COVID restrictions where we couldn't actually go out and knock on doors to get signatures. Apologies, a possum just landed on my roof. But yeah, the overwhelming support of the community wants these markets to go ahead, and this motion is a good step in getting the changes that will allow that. Thank you.
Thank you for that petition. I was happy to support it too, Councillor Christie. My own has generated similar interest. So I will say that on this issue, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you on it. And I thank you very much for your own activism. We've been a real team around it, and I think the community's appreciated it. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Van der Clay, the Deputy Mayor, has the call.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I have to declare a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest. I'm a Rotarian, and the main users of that facility for the markets are the Rotarians. So I will be staying online and voting for it because that's such a good organisation. I'm not a member of the Lower Blue Mountains Rotary Club, but I do know that the money they raise at those markets goes back into the community.
It does.
I repeat, it goes back into the community.
Yeah, Councillor Vanderclay, I'm going to call you to order because your declaration of interest is turning into a speech. It's either one or the other, sir.
I'm finished, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Schreiber has the call, and I suspect he may be going to say something similar.
Similar, Mr. Mayor, as I am a Rotarian of many years' service in the Central Blue Mountains, I too will declare a non-pecuniary interest and stay in the rooms.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Schreiber. All right. Any other councillors wish to speak on the matter? There being no further, I will put the matter to the vote. I should probably declare a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest myself. At Lower Mountains Rotary, I'm an honorary member of Lower Mountains Rotary and Paul Harris Fellow, appointed so by the Lower Mountains Rotary. So there, it's declared. I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors, for your support. Councillors, I will now go around the room and withdraw items that councillors wish to speak to. I don't think there are any that are out due to conflicts of interest. So I think we're safe there. I'll start with Councillor Fell, just because he's next to me on the screen. Councillor Fell, what do you wish to pull out?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull out items 17
Yes,
and 22.
indeed. Thank you very much. Councillor Hua. You're on mute, Councillor Hua.
Yes, could you come back to me?
If I must.
Yeah, I think others will.
Thank you,
put them on
Councillor
hold.
Hua. Councillor Brown.
9, hang on, yes. 9, 12,
Mm-hmm.
15,
Yes.
22,
Yes.
24 and 27.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hollywood, you content? You're on mute.
I am content and they're already out.
Yes, thank you. Councillor McGregor, are you content? Content. Councillor Vanderclay, does contentment fall upon you?
No, it doesn't, Mr. Mayor. Item 21.
Item 21, you're a malcontent and you want to pull out item 21. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Schreiber, are you content? Your waving suggests you're content.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Your contentment happies me. Councillor Bowling, are you content? You don't look it, but are you?
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Fernanda, content or not content? You're on mute.
No, coming back to me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Miles.
Item 20, Mr. Mayor. I regret that I'm not content.
20. I've known you so many years and never known you to be anything but malcontent. Councillor Christie.
Item 16, please.
Item 16, indeed. Okay. Councillor Hua, I come back to you.
Thanks, no, I'm content.
Oh, good to know. Thank you. I'm relieved that you're content. Councillor Fernanda, content. Excellent. Have I missed anybody? I've not. Excellent. All right. That means I'll take a motion from the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Fell that items 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 13, 14, 18, 19, 23, 25, 26, 28 are all passed in globo. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I will now come to item number 9. Does anyone wish to move anything?
I was just going to move it.
Moved the recommendation as a motion by Councillor Brown, seconded by her dear friend Councillor Hollywood. Councillor Brown has the floor.
I don't want to say a lot. I just wanted to acknowledge that I was pleased to see that our investments are continuing to move away from the big 4 and to go toward more institutions with stronger ethical and sustainable policies. We seem to have gone from around 10% to about 33%. So thank you to the staff for continuing in that trajectory, and I hope we continue to do that to ensure that our money is being spent on positive endeavours that aren't harming the planet or people. So thank you.
Is the way of this council. Thank you, Councillor Brown, for that. Anyone further on this matter, or can I put it? I think I can put it. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 12. Does anyone wish to move anything? It relates to the Gully Plan of Management. Move the Deputy Mayor recommendation as a resolution. Seconded Councillor Brown, I think seconds it. Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Brown, I'll give you the call.
Look, I obviously want to acknowledge the huge amount of work on this and how far the council has come since 1957, when the people of the Gully were evicted. I think it's really powerful, some of the submissions that people have made and the acknowledgement, and I do acknowledge that Mayor Jim Angel did formally apologise, and that we've continued in that path. So I think this is wonderful that it's now, since 2002, a delegated Aboriginal place, and it's becoming this beautiful place, very powerful place. All this great work has been done on the plan of management. I also just want to specifically say I was pleased to see that there's now a shift toward actually maintaining the racetrack for the purposes of the passive recreation, because certainly the feedback I've had, particularly walking with elders there, is that they like to have that stable route that they can use as they get older, that people with prams, people even with wheelchairs can use. So in a way, you're using infrastructure for a different purpose than the purpose that dispossessed people, the second dispossession, but that I think it is important. And I noticed, and I'm not sure on this, but I noticed that there seemed to be a concern that there was no maintenance budget. And I just want to flag that I think it's important that, along with recognising that keeping the track is actually a good community resource for increasing accessibility, we need to also have maintenance. The other sort of change I was pleased to see from, I think, past positions is that the need for toilets in the upper area, where there aren't toilets there, and with the increasing use, which is great, particularly with the interpretation there, the very powerful interpretation of the history of the place. A lot of people use it now for passive recreation, and there need to be toilets. And again, I've actually put in a CSR on this because I've had some complaints from people I've been walking there with, and again, including elders, that they want public toilets. And I'd just like to say on that I actually think we need to, I noticed there's no plan for toilets, there's no funding for toilets at this stage. So I would ask that we be looking at portaloos as a public health issue. And so, yes, thank you again. And the final thing I would say is that I do love the interpretation that's there, but I know that there's still more stories that have not yet been documented and are not yet there. And so there is still more to tell. There are some very powerful stories of the gully, including of the few elders still alive who were actually born there and lived there while it was still a community place of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. But congratulations to everyone involved in this very large work. Thank you.
Councillors, before I take anyone else, and there may not be, but as Mayor, I want to thank the traditional owners for their contribution to this plan of management. As has been said, the Council in 2005 issued an apology, and this very year we issued our own statement from the heart right here in this chamber, and it was a searing document that covered very clearly the impact of intergenerational dispossession on the people who lived here within the Blue Mountains. The Gully is a really important place, and the thanks that I give to the traditional owners is not just in relation to their good graces around our acts of reconciliation, which are just eloquent in their warmth, but I also want to thank them for what they've created. The Gully is a very special part of the Blue Mountains, and it has been created thus by the loving hands of the traditional owners whose vision has been given force by their involvement in this place. So as the Mayor of the city, I want to extend my thanks to the traditional owners. My thanks also to our staff for supporting them, Director Langevad's team and others, the CEO for her leadership as well. You can all please feel good about the great work you've done. But I think you would all join with me in saying that our traditional owners have created out of something awful, something very special here in our city. Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Mr. Langevad, it is quite unusual, but I'm going to give you, as a member of the ELT, the floor to enter the debate.
Through the CEO, Mr. Mayor, I just want to draw Council's attention to Recommendation 3. Recommendation 3 notes that the Minister's consent to adopt the Gully Aboriginal Place POM has been sought. An hour before this meeting, the Minister's consent has actually been granted. So I wonder if the Council may wish to amend that recommendation.
Yes, can we take that as amended, simply noting the granting and have the words reflect that? I'm content for the Executive Officer and Mr. Langevad and the CEO to ensure that those words are properly reflected in the report. And I think we as councillors know what we're passing. Thank you, Mr. Langevad. Anything further in this matter? There being nothing further, there's one matter and I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously, and I thank you all. Item number 15 is moved by Councillor Bowling, seconded by Councillor Christie, and it relates to the tender report, construction of shared path infrastructure to the zigzag walking track and reopening of siding lookout in Ward 4. Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Brown.
More some questions. I pulled this out because I think we all received a submission from the public on this prior to the meeting. I wanted to ask through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager.
Yes.
The issues that were raised are sort of twofold. One is impact on heritage. We're saying there wasn't an environmental impact statement. I would have thought there might have been a review of our environmental factors. Is that right?
CEO. You're on mute, CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll refer to Director Rorder.
Mr. Rorder.
Yes, there was a detailed assessment of environmental factors and also of heritage factors. You will note in the report that we identify the sensitivity of this site with respect to heritage, and the report has required all the contractor to ensure that there will be an archaeological heritage assessment done before work starts, and that will continue during the construction of work. There will also be particular attention paid to the surface, and we're looking at alternate options to concrete. And you'll see that's why we have a recommendation that authorises the CEO to approve variations to the contract to take that into account. It factored into the selection of the preferred contractor, where we selected the contractor that had the best track record of working with heritage and environmental factors, because we can't find all of those things until work starts. So we'll have to do that a check before work starts, and it will proceed as the work is progressing.
Thank you, Mr. Rorder. Further questions?
So that's good to hear. Just following on that, because one of the issues raised was the amount of concrete, which I had understood was to do with accessibility, but obviously there are environmental issues with concrete and the lime and the way it can impact the acidity of soil and so on. So am I right in understanding that it is now not going to be the case that it's going to be all concrete, or that's simply being looked into?
It's ever been the case that it wouldn't be, and that email did not characterise what's planned there at all accurately.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak?
Just briefly, Mr.
Councillor Christie, you have the floor.
Just in regards to the concrete path within the Eastern Escarpment Plan, Mr. Mayor, isn't it true that we have been advocating for this for the last 18 months, initially after residents of Lapston first raised it with yourself and me, with
Yes.
Mr. Waller's predecessor?
Yes, and that's what led to Mr. Rorder's statement tonight that alternatives to concrete are being canvassed, and indeed the community consulted on those alternatives. Yes, it's quite right.
Great, thank you. I just wanted on the record that we've been advocating for that exact thing for the last 2 years.
Indeed, so we have. All right, anyone else wish to speak on this? And I thank you, Councillor Christie. All right, well, I will just say a couple of things. I was amused to read a document poorly presented, one of the worst examples of political propaganda I've ever seen, certainly not as eye-catching, Councillor Christie, as yours and mine are, that claimed that there was no money being spent in Ward 4. In fact, all of the money was going to the Upper Blue Mountains. Unfortunately, and I'm sure it was only an error, an oversight, in fact, some things were overlooked in that document. I know Councillor Christie, Councillor Bowling will join with me in helping to correct the record. And now with this item, there's no better time to do it, because this item is one of them. Some things were missed out of that pamphlet in terms of expenditure in Ward 4. And one of them was, in fact, the $2.1 million we're spending at this very location. What also fell off the list was the $1.5 million we spent at Glenbrook Park. Sadly, what's also missing is a near $3 million going into Knapsack Oval. And what also fell off the list was the $500,000 being spent at St John's Oval, not to be missed out, the $200,000 at Warramoo Oval, and the $500,000 spent at Lapston netball courts during this term of office. This is an excellent project. I'm glad Councillor Brown raised the issues she did, because it is important to place on the public record what the council's doing. But my tuppence worth is that this represents enormous expenditure in the Lower Blue Mountains, the most ever in a term, and I'm really glad we all get to be part of that. There's no opposition. There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. I thank you. Item number 17 is moved and seconded. Moved Councillor Hollywood, seconded Councillor Hua. Councillor Hollywood, you have the call.
I thank you very, very much, Mr. Mayor. And look, in a similar vein, I think I've pulled this out. It is a tender report, but the significance of it is this. We have been advocating as councillors for increased expenditure on footpaths for some considerable
Councillor Hollywood, stop. I'm withdrawing your moving and I'm withdrawing Councillor Hua's seconding because we didn't do item number 16 relating to the tender report of the knapsack oval. And so I'm going to ask you, Councillor Hollywood, to hold that thought. And item 16 is moved Councillor Christie, seconded Councillor Bowling, and I'm going to ask Councillor Christie to contribute to the debate. Sorry, Councillor Christie, thank you for your message. As you see, I wear thick glasses and my eyes are not what they once were. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and sorry, Councillor Hollywood, for interrupting your speech. I will be very quick. I am not going to grandstand on the $3 million that we're investing in knapsack.
How much?
$3 million.
Oh, right. Was that on that pamphlet?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, right.
Didn't mention the other $7.4 million we spent in Blackstone either.
Oh, right.
But Mr. Mayor, I did have a question through you to the CEO, to the relevant staff.
Yes.
So we all know that the Blue Mountains Football Club have gone under some considerable disruption due to the development. I wanted to seek clarification that council staff and the CEO would work with prospective builders and the club to minimise disruption as much as possible for the upcoming season.
Yes. CEO, through you to Mr. Rorder, if that's all right.
Sure. Mr. Rorder.
Yes, it's been a central part of the engagement of the contractor that we as the staff and also the contractor are working closely with the clubs that are using the facility. We have regular meetings with them. The contractor will have regular meetings with them in recognition that the facilities will be in use during an overlap period while construction is ongoing.
Thank you, Mr. Rorder. Councillor Christie with a further question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just because this is a $3 million development, would it be possible for councillors to be, the ward councillors to be continuously briefed? I recall during the construction of the car park, councillors were getting emails every Friday night from the club, but it would be good if we could get these kind of detailed briefs from the staff.
Mr. Rorder, I think we can do that, can't we?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Christie, anything further?
No, that was all. Thank you, Mr. Rorder.
Councillor Bowling, have you anything to add? No, there's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Item number 17 is moved Councillor Hollywood, seconded Councillor Hua. Councillor Hollywood has the floor.
Thank you, and I'm sorry that everybody has to hear me speak again, but I'm sure you will enjoy that. Not. Anyway, look, the reason I pulled this out is to note the significance of this tender. When I was first running for council in 2012, I door knocked a lot of the area around that part of Wentworth Falls. And one of the things that people in Wentworth Falls said that they would really like and is really needed for safety for a whole range of reasons, amenity, is a footpath along Sinclair Crescent. Many other parts of the mountains have footpaths along the back road that runs along the railway line, but this was a missing link. And we are finally delivering it. We are actually talked about it for a very long time. But what I want to note again is that we are actually spending nearly $500,000 on two really critical projects that link the community with footpaths. So that's in Wentworth Falls and also in Lawson. We will be linking the town down to the South Lawson Park, which is a multi-use park, may I say, and we'll be having more paths, bike paths for children and families to use, in addition to the expanded dog off leash area that will be fenced to protect the dogs from falling off the waterfall cliff. So I really think that this demonstrates that we are finally at the point as a council of investing in more footpaths. Tonight, we're seeing $500,000 spent, and this is in addition to new footpath that has been laid down in Hazelbrook and also in Falconbridge. And I think that this is the way forward to be able to link it with projects through the city deals and other grant programs that, to be able to improve the capacity for people to walk to these amenities. So I really think this is a milestone in terms of council's achievements. Congratulations. I look forward to walking on it.
All right. Thank you very much, Councillor. Anything further on this matter?
Sorry. Hello.
Councillor Fernando, I beg your pardon. You have the call.
No, I tried to actually interject before. I'm terribly sorry. Not sure. You keep freezing out, Mr. Mayor. Your screen, and I'm not sure if other councillors are having the same issue.
Thank you. Am I freezing out for anybody else? No, the issue seems to be yours, Councillor Fernando.
I just wanted to clarify before we vote because I can't get in at times.
Okay, no worries. I'll call you as being in favour. And if I call you wrong, you can always text me. All right, further speakers on this matter. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Van der Klee has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is just an absolute great outcome, the tender for this. With the new play equipment that's just been installed at Wentworth Falls Lake and along Sinclair Crescent there in the park. With this footpath that's adding into it, it's just going to be an absolute pleasure because I've had a lot of communication from residents who want the footpath along there. What has also made a fantastic improvement is the corner of Blaxland Road and Sinclair Crescent, the new intersection there with the divided road works tremendously. And we are slowly but surely moving to improve those whole sections. I look forward also to the Dog Off Leash Park and this connection to the Lawson Town Centre with what we're doing there. The tender's been let for that. That is all part of this process. And it's so good to see that we are now getting to a stage where a lot of these projects that we've had on the drawing board are coming to fruition. So I want to thank the staff and everybody involved in it and look forward to seeing the facility in full operation and the footpath for the community.
Thanks so much, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Brown, then Councillor Hua.
I really just wanted to acknowledge that I'm always pleased now to see that the staff tell us, actually mention whether the successful tenderer is local and has local employees. And so although we did not go with having an actual weighting on that, I'm pleased to see that it's recognised as part of the value that a tenderer brings, and also that in this case we do have a fairly local business with people living in the LGA as part of the team will be working on it, so that some of this almost $500,000 will also be going back into our economy and circulating. So that's great, and I'm going to resist any commentary about all these wonderful projects in Ward 4, 2 and 3 and say good on you all, and we hope to see some money being spent very soon in Ward 1.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Brown. I will now ask Councillor Hua to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I just wanted to say exactly what Councillor Brown had just said. So I'll thank her for making her observations about the expenditure in Ward 2 of funds that are going into the local community, and to reinforce the views so eloquently expressed by my ward colleagues about what a great thing it is that we are finally seeing some of these projects coming to fruition. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hua. Councillor McGregor. Where'd he go? There he is.
There I am.
Councillor
Sorry
McGregor.
about that, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, and I too welcome the extension of footpaths through the LGA generally, and I look forward to that being carried on along Hathill Road in the next term of government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further councillors? No, there's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item number 20 is moved by Councillor Fell and seconded by Councillor Miles. Councillor Fell has the floor. Buttonshaw Park Plan and Management.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be very brief here. This is another of those projects which it's great to see coming into reality, actually happening now. And I'm aware that there'll be an amendment, but in moving this motion, I'd just like to acknowledge the role of the staff and thank them very much for the amount of work that's gone into it, and to thank the community for their input. And I think that we're going to have a really good outcome on this one. So it's really great to see. Nice to see Ward 3 moving ahead in this area. And I think the four major parks, which are going to be along the Great Western Highway in the mountains, are going to be fantastic facilities for our communities. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you so much, Councillor Fell. Councillor Miles has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your acquiescence, I'll yield my seconding of this matter to Councillor Fernanda, that I might propose the alteration, which is with the Executive Officer.
So yielded. Councillor Fernanda seconds.
Yeah.
No, she doesn't wish to.
Okay, I'll maintain.
What I can do to assist you is that Councillor van der Clay will second, and you may wish to propose an amendment.
Yep. So, Mr. Mayor, after consultation with the residents, remembering that Buttonshaw Park is remarkably constrained with residences on many sides and limited parking, I propose that the maximum number of persons to be present for an event be reduced from 500 to 250, and that a public address system and other noise-making machinery not be permitted in that park. And in just speaking to that briefly, this is a very beautiful park, but we do have to make sure that while we improve the facility, we welcome families to come and have passive recreation, including the play equipment that is yet to be built. It's important to remember we don't have to live with the imposts that local residents do, and I'm sure it'll be very successful and there'll be a lot of people, but too much is too much. And we do want to make sure that there's not large-scale events that just happen to grow and grow and grow, leaving residents with a continual source of noise and disruption of their lives. So I'll leave it at that. I think we've struck a balance about as good as we can with this issue. I thank the residents for their perseverance in informing me and other councillors of their issues, and I think we've done the right thing by everybody. Thank you.
Councillor Fernanda has the call.
Thank you. This is a very difficult decision for me because, and I want to make it very clear for the record and for any public who are listening, any media who may want to make commentary on what I'm about to say. I am not opposed to any play equipment in Buttonshaw Park. I welcome more play areas for children of all ages, people with disabilities. I fully endorse that and I welcome it. But in good conscience, I cannot support this plan at all. We asked council to go back and to redesign this park. It was too close to the residents. Buttonshaw Park has a lot of open space, and to still put park with lots of play equipment right up against virtually the fences of residents, I think is wrong. And Councillor Miles, I do thank you for trying to reduce the number to 250. But again, I still think that is way too much in an area that's fully dense, that has fully has residential density surrounding the area. I've got to put myself into the shoes and walk in the shoes of residents. That's what I put my hand up for. And I know deep down that I would not want loud concerts happening right up against my back fence. Whether it's 500 or 250, the noise impact is still going to be great. And then there's the parking issue. If it's allowing 250 people, where are all those cars going to go? I'm sorry, I cannot support this plan. As much as I support the fact that we have a grant to help us put in more play areas for children, and we need that, I've got to think of the residents. I've got to think of the impact of them when it comes down to it. And that park has got such a large open space to it. Why are we still putting up the play area right up against fences? I'm sorry, I cannot do that for the residents. They came to me, they opposed where the park was going to be. They came to both Daniel and I, Councillor Miles and I, and they said, we don't want this up against our back fence. We go to council, I'm sorry, we asked for you to redesign the plans. That wasn't redesigning. I'm sorry, you've still got the area that's way up against those people's homes, and I cannot support it. And I cannot support even 250. If it was my backyard, and I'm sure if it was any of your backyards, you wouldn't like that either. So why are we approving it? I'm sorry, I just can't support any plan for Buttonshaw Park while it's impacting the residents so greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fernando. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Brown.
So are we doing the amendment at the moment? We are.
Yes, the amendment's been taken on board by the mover and seconder.
Oh, it has. Okay. Yeah.
Indeed.
I am in a quandary on this because
We'll just start the clock.
Yep. You know, we've just had a motion earlier about the temporary land use and the DAs for events and so on. And one of the things is that those events have to happen somewhere. And we have just 4 district parks. I'm of the view that there should be a 5th one. But these are the parks that we are giving all these extra resourcing to. And these events that we want, these community events, they have to happen somewhere, and parks are the natural place. So I am concerned about pulling out, you know, and I understand about there's residents who live around it, but these parks aren't just for the immediate residents. That's the issue we face, that they're actually for the whole district, and people's use. And the events that happen are, you know, part of social cohesion. So as I said, I'm struggling with this. I'd also just note that if you have 250 people, you actually do need a public address system. You know, and these things can be managed by the limit on the number of events and the times they're allowed to happen. It's not like you say they can happen all the time every day and so on. So as I said, I'm a bit concerned now about trying to manage this last minute change to a park that actually is for thousands of people to use, and trying to find that balance. So I'm a little bit caught out by this and unsure, because I feel that we've now said 2 different things in the same meeting. That we do want more community events, more of that, and things that also help the economy, but we don't. Where are they going to happen? We don't have big enough halls. Where are they going to happen? I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Trying to see if there are any hands. There don't appear to be. There's one matter before us. I'll just check the mover and seconder were content to take on board the minor amendment. Yes, they were. Yes. There's one matter before us. It hasn't been spoken against. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against?
I think I'm against.
Councillors Brown and Fernanda, I declare it carried. All right, thank you, councillors. Item number 21, does anyone wish to move something? Item 21 is move the Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Hollywood. Councillor Hollywood, moves, Deputy Mayor seconds. Councillor Hollywood has the call.
The Deputy Mayor pulled it out, so I'll reserve.
My apologies. Deputy Mayor moves. Councillor Hollywood seconds. My apologies. I couldn't. Yep. you both put your hands up at the same time, so I just sort of.
Mr. Mayor, I'll succeed to the my ward colleague, Councillor Hollywood, to lead the debate.
Councillor Hollywood, he has yielded to you.
Okay. Look, in terms of this report, again, it's something that has been on the agenda since, in fact, before I was elected in 2012. And I know that Councillor van der Klee has been working on this issue, which relates to the new Lawson fire station, RFS fire station, and then what would happen to the old building. Now, back in 2014, we had an expression of interest, and no one can remember that expression of interest because it was actually so long ago. So to see this come before us finally resolved, I think is really important. And I hope that the negotiations on the lease with the Blacktown Youth College go well and are realised. I do note, though, and it's probably foreshadowing a matter for whoever is on the next term of council, and that we do have a growing number of community groups that are new and emerging who are looking for space to be able to conduct their activities. And we have a historic situation of community groups that have been around for many years, absolutely worthy, in council buildings. And then we've got the new generation of community groups that have nothing. And I think that this is something that we've got to look at. Many community groups over the years have approached each of the ward councillors seeking to use this building. Yes, we had the EOI for Blacktown Youth College, and it does worthy work working with children and young people that are disengaging from the mainstream school system. So it's an important, it's serving an important community function. There's nothing more important than supporting the education of our children and young people. But having said that, we do have this issue of community groups needing spaces. I think we have to come up with some creative solutions about how we might be able to support that, but that is something for whoever is in the next term of council.
Thank you, Councillor Hollywood. Anyone else wish to speak on this? Councillor van der Klee, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I totally agree with Councillor Hollywood on this. This issue has been around for a long time. When we first, the issue of the fire brigade moving to its new site near the police station and fire and rescue on the highway. And in those days, there was a big feeling within the community that they felt that the fire station, which was built by the community, that it should have a community component, whatever went back into the building. And I think this is a good fit. The Blacktown Youth College do a lot of good work for youth that have educational problems and within the mainstream education system, and they've been either they've fallen out of high school, or they're mainly teenagers fallen out of high school, and the college picks them up and facilitates them to get their formal education, so they can become good citizens into the community and have a decent education. So I totally support this. It's been a long time coming, and I want to thank the staff who put this all together and Blacktown Youth College, and wish them well in the future. And like Councillor Hollywood said, we have a big issue with other community groups who are willing to look for space in our facilities. So it's going to be an issue that we're going to be tackling for a long, long time. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Does Councillor Hua wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. But briefly, I would just like to add my commendations to those of my colleagues, to Blacktown Youth College for finally bringing this project to fruition. It has indeed been a very, very long time. But look, I just want to speak very briefly from personal experience as a former teacher in the area. I've had former students, and look, let's face it, friends, school's not for everybody. There are a significant number of young people who just fall off the rails and are unable to be catered for within a conventional school environment. And the Blacktown Youth College and others like them perform an absolutely invaluable role in preventing amazing kids with such talents and such abilities, but from such difficult and disadvantaged backgrounds, from falling off the rails and falling through the cracks. This is a vital safety net for our educational system, and it's just fantastic that we are able to offer this kind of service locally without them having to head off to Penrith Valley or to much more remote locations. So I think it's a wonderful thing to see. They've got a long way to go yet, and I wish them every success in their journey.
Thank you, Councillor Hua. Does anyone else wish to speak? There's one matter before us, hasn't been spoken against. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 22 is moved Councillor Hollywood, seconded Councillor McGregor. Councillor Hollywood has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Density development.
Density
Councillor
development. Now, as I take a deep breath to speak,
where have I heard this before?
I would suggest that in a normal council meeting, in a normal circumstance, this actually might be something that is passed in globo, because we know that there is general agreement and support for maintaining and protecting the provisions within our local environment plan, provisions that have been built up over many years with the skill and expertise of experts, our planners, our community, and indeed the governing body making decisions at the end. What is significant tonight about this item is that we are seeking to make an amendment to the LEP to protect provisions within our LEP because of state government imposed policies to enable increased density in our towns and villages. Now, we have sought to seek an exemption from that code. We almost got it. We had nods, I believe, from the minister.
More than nods.
More than nods, thank you. And but we haven't been able to land that nod in a room into a fully fledged and robust exemption. And so we've had our council officers and indeed our local planning panel have to come up with a way that we can protect our LEP. And that is by moving this amendment around minimum lot sizes. Now, all of this sounds quite technical, but the bottom line is that this is about protecting the provisions within our LEP and ensuring that the footprint of the built form in our towns and villages does not impact adversely on our the way in which water flows down through the ground, through down to our creeks, down to our waterfalls, and ultimately into the World Heritage Area. Now, the reason I have pulled this out is that there are some people who are running in this election that are not on council now, but are seeking to run on an agenda, in fact, a plan for Ward 2 to increase, not even advocate for, but to increase density housing in our villages. Nobody actually knows what villages are, so we assume that that is absolutely everywhere where there is an urban footprint. Now, the thing is that is scary is that if this motion, if this particular resolution, if this report came up in the next term of council, we might have a very, very different outcome in terms of the vote. We might have people on council that actually don't seek to go to the minister to protect our LEP and seek an exemption. They might actually think that's a whole lot of codswallop and a whole lot of waste of time. And then when it comes to measures and recommendations from our staff to protect our local environment plan as a city in a World Heritage Area, and I can't say that enough, from the impacts of increasing density on our environment and on the character of the Blue Mountains. If those sorts of people who are advocating for density housing in our villages are on council, they most likely will absolutely vote this item down. That is what is at stake in the next election. The next election is about how we protect our LEP. I will be very proud. In fact, I'm incredibly passionate about putting my hand up in support of this report. And I really commend everybody to read the statements that are made by our local planning panel about the link between our local environment plan and how we protect the World Heritage Area. We talk about the dam wall and preventing that dam wall from going up because it's going to flood parts of our World Heritage Area. But just imagine if we get people on council that are going to wreck our LEP. The dam will be nothing in comparison with what will happen to our waterfalls, to our creeks, and to our natural landscape.
Time is up.
Thank you, Storm. Thank you, Councillor Hollywood. I was so enthralled by that speech, I wasn't looking at the square with the clock in it. My deep apologies to all councillors for that. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brown. By the way, Councillor Brown, before you take the call, CEO, I sent you a message a moment ago. I have a note here that item 24 is withdrawn and will come to the November meeting with enclosure. Is that correct? You're on mute.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Mark your business papers accordingly. Item 24 is withdrawn and will come to the next meeting with enclosure. Councillor Brown, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm speaking in support of this and of the tireless work of our planning staff to try and weave their way through these endless layers of planning legislation. I think there's two things to say here. What's important is that the council does have a commitment to diversifying its housing. And we do know, and the planning staff and our LEP reflect this, that we understand that we need to develop housing for older people who don't necessarily want house and gardens. At the moment, we have 92% house and gardens still. So we do need more sort of low rise, medium density to facilitate also for younger people who don't necessarily want large houses either. So it's not that we don't, and we need affordable housing. So we need all those things, and we need to work with the community and with business interests for that to happen. But I think what's so frustrating here is the planning that actually had, which trying to control which zones it happened in, and that we would have that close to town and village centres. So Katoomba, of course, is the obvious one where we've already got 4 and 5 story buildings going back to the 1920s. So we're a bit, we sort of got it already, so it's hard not to keep getting it. But the idea is that you want that close to the town centres, not near the either the World Heritage bush, because yes, then you've got more runoff, but also not near fire risk. So the town centres tend to be as far away as you can be from the bush because they're at the top of the ridge. So, and it also means people aren't, they've got more people able to walk to services, so it's environmentally a good return. And this in a way is forcing, my understanding is that the compromise, unfortunately, is we're almost having to allow some of that medium density, low rise medium density to creep out further than we would want to from the town centres. That's what I'm reading, but that we are doing that. The staff are now proposing that as a compromise. So I'm supporting it because I understand we've got to do something, or we're going to end up with medium density on smaller lots than we have at the moment, going down to 700 square metre lots from what's proposed as 1,000. So it is a compromise. It's not ideal. What the LEP actually wanted, which was to keep it concentrated in town centres, is the better. But, you know, we have to live with what is possible at the moment. So that's why I'm supporting it. Just as far as what Councillor Hollywood was saying, I always think we never talk about this, but our biggest problem is that no sane society builds on the watershed. And we have been doing that for 200 years. We've built on the watershed. So we have an inbuilt problem that the one place you don't put your built environment is where the waterways start. And so we will always have to look really carefully at the amount of hard surface we can have, because we're actually, our towns are located in not a very sustainable place naturally. So that's why we have to work so hard, and why it's so important that we don't have massive hard surfaces, and not just of the housing, but then of the roads and so on that go with it. And why we've developed such good practice and many new innovations in stormwater management, because it's so critical. So thank you to the staff and for this incredibly complex document. And I support it. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor McGregor. I think you're
just an observation, Mr. Mayor. We have a problem with communications, I think, with some of these medium density sort of developments, that where we've got zoning for them already close to the town centres, and they simply haven't been taken up. This isn't about those sorts of zonings. This is another product of them having the state government wanting a simple one-size-fits-all template across the whole of the state, irrespective of the sort of geography of the area, or the amount of building going on in the area, or the zonings that they've got available to them. It's yet another area where our powers to determine what happens in our communities have been taken away from us or seriously reduced. And I would also recommend that anybody who really wants to know what it's about should read the local planning panel statement that's in the business paper. It's a simple, eloquent expression of this new type of zoning. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Fell has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is another example, as has been pointed out by Councillor McGregor, where the state government is really trying to impose its uniform template right across the state. And it's another example of where that is totally at odds with the reality of the way that we live in the Blue Mountains, with the development, the historic development of our communities and the whole geography of our area. With our planning powers, our powers to determine development applications having been taken from elected councillors, it comes down to LEP 2015 being the absolute foundation to safeguard our way of life in the Blue Mountains. And I will always defend LEP 2015, which took us so long to achieve. And I'm sure that I'm joined by the majority of councillors in that. And it is extremely disturbing to have brought to my attention the fact that there are people running for council, people who were referred to by Councillor Hollywood, who would actually run on a platform of effectively destroying the lifestyles that we've all enjoyed in the mountains for so long. I'll certainly be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fell. Councillor van der Klee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I totally agree with my colleagues here on council. And I want to thank Mr. Langerford's team in putting this amendment of the LEP. It's so important. We've slowly but surely, we have been pressured to change one thing after another. This is another example. The height restrictions on commercial properties. We haven't heard the last of that for higher densities in our town centres. And it is just shameful. We put together for the councillors that were on council when we did the LEP. We started in the early 2000s on it, putting it all together. We had a revision on it. It's one of the best documents. It's been very well worked at. And the most important thing is that the community overwhelmingly supported it. And we cannot, the infrastructure will not be able to have another 20 or 30,000 population here in the Blue Mountains, which the state government want. We don't need that because it'll change the way of life that we have here in the Blue Mountains. So I will be wholeheartedly supporting this.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Vanderklay, I might ask you if I could enter the debate and you would take the chair.
I'm more than happy to take the chair, Mr. Mayor, and you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. The time is apposite to reflect upon the fact that the local environment plan that protects the Blue Mountains is an incredibly important document. Those of us who were on the 2012 council were there during the painstaking process of implementing it. And we saw the dedication of the team of officers who made it a reality. But make no mistake, this local environment plan and all of the protections we build within it is under attack. It's under attack by successive government attempts to water it down. We've seen various housing codes and standard instruments applied across New South Wales that do not work in the Blue Mountains. Amazingly, the medium density housing code actually puts, the high density housing code actually puts medium density housing or unit type housing in fire prone areas. The low rise housing code, I should say, does that. I think it's been renamed now, but the low rise housing code does put those types of developments in fire prone areas. That code also bypasses the council and allows private certifiers to take over the responsibility for approving such developments. It's appalling to think that not only are elected councillors now not part of the approval process, but in that instance, even our officers aren't. And what we do have to remember is that 5 years ago, the state government, unique in any other jurisdiction in Australia, removed Sydney councillors from DA processes altogether. That is the macro and external threat that our local environment plan faces. And our local environment plan supports the World Heritage Area because it supports the interfaces. But there's also an internal threat. And people should be very clear that not only is the government coming at the local environment plan and our protections from without, but there is an attempt and has been an attempt since 2015 to come at it from within. Those of us who were on the council from 2015 remember a campaign waged by the Mountains Combined Chambers of Commerce aimed at creating higher densities throughout the Blue Mountains and undermining key tenets of our local environment plan. It was a vigorous campaign and it was one that didn't work. Well, now I ask all members of the community to be vigilant because you'll see in my respectful submission, their agents seeking to join this council so that they might be able to undermine the local environment plan within. Well, the cat's out of the bag with what was distributed in Ward 2 on the weekend, and people have probably seen some publicity around that. But we must remain ever vigilant and strong in protecting this precious area from the scourge of overdevelopment that we have seen decimate historic parts of Sydney. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll retake the chair.
You have the chair, Mr. Mayor.
Does anyone else wish to speak? No one else wishes to speak. There's one matter before us. Oh, Councillor Hua, like an apparition, appears.
Look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, after such a long and eloquent list of speakers, there's really very little that I could add, but I can't remain silent without expressing my wholehearted support for the motion and to live in hope of our planning powers being once more restored to us in more gentle and progressive political times. Thank you. I'll conclude my remarks there.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Christie has the call.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'll be brief. I don't know what much else that I could add further to this debate. However, in Ward 4, we're seeing in our own community an independent candidate that just wants to ram through the Blaxland Town Centre Master Plan, which in its current form, which wouldn't actually have any community benefit, which we have been advocating for on this council for some time. So we do understand the threat all the way down here in Ward 4 as well, and that our LEP must be protected, and I'll be supporting this motion.
And Councillor Christie, can I thank you for standing by the LEP, as you always have. And you were part of the council that brought it in. Thank you for your words tonight. Councillor Schreiber has the call. I think you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, like Councillor Christie, is concerned. What concerns me is that after many discussions with Mr. Langford, I've been informed, and we all have, about the eastern side of the highway with the zoning it is in for the water catchment area, which we have to protect. So by protecting that and by what Mr. Langford has brought to council tonight, which I'm only too happy to support, is a grave concern that people do not understand that water catchment area, which is, people think it's there that can be used for any reason at all. Well, they want to go and check with the council first and find out the zoning of it and that it is under the water catchment area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Schreiber. Councillor Daniel Miles has the call. You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's all been said, but I wanted to make one really important point. In 2015, a number of us, including yourself, myself, Mr. Mayor, planning staff, and the newly installed state member, Trish Doyle, met with the then planning minister, Robert Stokes. He left that portfolio sometime after that and became education minister, but has now returned to planning. The Robert Stokes of 2015 committed to protecting our LEP, committed to finding a way to deliver us the outcome we call R6, Residential 6, which is an extra protection zone for the leafy historical kind of areas like Craig End Street, Lura and parts of Glenbrook that have particular character housing, we call it. The Robert Stokes of today was requested by 43 Sydney councils to give an exemption to these codes, and not one single council was given an exemption. So in closing, let's all ponder on what would make a minister change from such a sympathetic position to one of, we're going to build as much as we want, or allow people to build as much as we want, even in bushfire-prone areas, and you all just have to cop it. I'll leave that there.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Does anyone else wish to speak, or are we at rest? Councillor Brown, have you not already spoken?
I wanted to ask a question through you.
Yes.
To, I think, well, Councillor Miles.
Yes, Councillor Brown, if it's relevant to the matter before us.
I'm trying to understand, I mean, there's a few councillors I could ask this question. Is it how Councillor Miles views the live GA we have in Katoomba for 4, 5 and 6 story buildings that he and Councillor Vanderklay both supported in 2007? Do they still support that height level in Katoomba but not Blaxland, or is it because of the LEP 2015 that they've changed their views?
Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor
Miles.
Councillor Brown hasn't checked her Facebook, because I answered this very question this afternoon.
Don't
So I'm sure she already has heard my response, but I'll give it again. The answer is simply this, that Goldsmith Place development complied. And had we refused it and had gone to the Land and Environment Court, the council, on behalf of the community, loses any say over that development, and in fact can be altered by the applicant, as you would well know this, Councillor Brown. So faced with a fairly bleak position, we did what we actually did on a number of occasions, including the spires, including that one at Blaxland, behind Blaxland Library, Mr Mayor, which was one of the first ones that we dealt with. We made it better as best we could. So if you're attempting, Councillor Brown, to suggest that I support that kind of development, the answer is no. Will I vote to make it the best it can be for the community? You're damn right.
Now, I'm not going to take any more to and fro on this. That Councillor Miles has answered the question, and I'm not having any further debate. There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Item 24 has been withdrawn and will come back to the November meeting with enclosure. Item number 27 is moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Hua. Councillor Brown has the floor.
So you will all have seen this, and I think will be well aware of the amazing work that Junction 142 has done through the COVID lockdown. And the reason I'm proposing that we use money left over from last year's community grants is because the reason that money wasn't distributed is because so many groups actually had to wind down their activities, whereas Junction 142 cranked up enormously. As you see in some of the figures I've given, they've gone within a 13-month period, they've gone from 21 laundry users in July 2020 to 155 in the month of July 2021, and 30 shower users in July 2020 and 53 in the month of July 2021, as well as giving out toiletries that went from 11 sort of packages of toiletries and clothing and bedding in July 2020 to 111. So an enormous increase as COVID put more and more pressure on homeless people and people just stretched to breaking point. Who, I mean, I met a man who had a house, but he couldn't afford the water, he couldn't afford the heating, he couldn't afford power. That's how difficult it's been for people. And Junction 142 has done a huge amount of it, and they have to COVID clean between every use of the laundry and shower. Everyone who comes in has to have fresh towels, fresh toiletries. So the amount of work that's been done, largely volunteer, is just phenomenal. And I particularly want to acknowledge Stephen Bradley in that, but also John Cox for just the commitment to ensuring really what most of us take for granted, which is being able to have a hot shower and clean our clothes. And with COVID shutdowns, people weren't even able to use places that they might once use, like a pub or going to this, I know they use the Aquatic Centre as well. So that's also where some of the pressure came from. And also just more people ending up in very, very strange circumstances. I mean, in real poverty. So I just feel this one is, I think even the community groups, sure, we could re-advertise, but I think most of them would see that this is an essential service. This is something, there is no other, this is the only free, shower and laundry service with a COVID plan being properly run in the mountains. So the 27,000 would give them 9 months. They have started, they're just starting again with their food services, with the op shops going to start again. That will in the end bring some income in for them. And as you see, as part of this is also really getting the state and federal government to step in, because the council has already given some help on this front. But it's been now nearly 4 months that they've been running on a volunteer basis. It's really phenomenal, 3 days a week, it's about 24 hours work a week that's being done on a voluntary basis. And I think not many of us would have the stamina to do that as a voluntary thing and maintaining the COVID, obviously the COVID safety around it, ensuring that people have masks, they have gloves, and everything is thoroughly deep cleaned. So I really hope that this is supported, because I feel that it wasn't money that any community group were expecting, because it was actually left over from last year. There will be a new round in this financial year anyway, when they can, as they all come back into operation, they can get that money. But this is to ensure that really a service that's now at breaking point is maintained until we can get stable funding, to have stable funding. And it's not, ultimately, it is not a council responsibility, but I feel that ethically it is, and also given the huge commitment that this, the Junction 142 has shown, this is something we can really do to help just ensure it's maintained until stable funding is in place. So I hope everyone sees that and is supportive of it. As I said, it's not something that we have to take from any existing budgets. Thank you.
Thank you. Question to the CEO. CEO, is it the case that today and on another occasion, but as late as today, this afternoon, in fact, you've received an allegation relevant to the service?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Information has come to hand.
CEO, are you in a position to investigate that allegation promptly?
Yes, that would be our intent. Operationally, we support in principle the allocation of funds to this service, subject to investigation.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Christie with an amendment.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment which was previously circulated by the Executive Officer, which keeps the entire motion intact, but adds on a part 4 that the council endorses that approval is subject to the CEO satisfying herself that there are no issues with receiving, appropriately managing and acquitting the funds.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Christie. Does anyone wish to speak to the amendment, or is it clear enough? I think it's clear enough.
I can briefly explain if you want, but
yes, Councillor Christie, if you are, but just mindful of identities.
Yes, I'll be very brief and mindful of identities. I was contacted earlier today in regard by a whistleblower regarding an accusation around Junction 142, which I reported direct to the General Manager. As per my obligation as a councillor. I do believe that Junction 142 does provide essential services. I've moved a number of motions in this chamber regarding homelessness and council's ability to help out community organisations. So I just wanted to put that on the record. However, as a custodian of the ratepayers' money, I believe that we must do our due diligence before just willy-nilly allocating money, and I feel that this kind of accusation, I would not be comfortable just handing out money without it being investigated. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thanks, Councillor. Any other councillors wish to speak? All right. It's not been spoken against. There's one matter before us. I will ask the mover if the mover wishes to take the amendment on board.
So I'm understanding it's just to look into that.
Yes.
Yep.
So
I haven't seen the.
No, Councillor, an allegation was made today. It hasn't been widely circulated. It's just an allegation. It may indeed be completely untrue, but the allegation is serious. I expect that it is, from what I know, quite likely deeply untrue. However, the appropriate thing is that the CEO satisfies herself that that is the case. But as I say, I'll go out on a limb here because of my respect for Junction 142. I expect and anticipate that the CEO will be able to say that the allegation is untrue and do so in quick order. But it's appropriate when an allegation like that is made that it is properly investigated. And it may be untrue. And if it is untrue, it may also be untrue due to no willfulness on the part of the complainant. Things are sometimes opaque and people act in good faith. So I think we can assume everyone's acted in good faith and we'll be able to clarify the issues simply. So Councillor Brown, you've taken it on board. I'm sure Councillor Hua agrees. On that basis, I'm going to say the motion hasn't been spoken against. I'm going to put it. All those in favour? Against? I declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. Well, that's the end of notices of motion. Before I move on to matters of urgency, I have a procedural motion standing in the name of Councillor Daniel Miles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per previous council meetings, I move that so much of standing orders be suspended as would prevent me from moving a motion of censure against Councillor Kerry Brown.
So it's moved that the suspension of standing orders occurs in the terms that you've outlined them. Is it seconded? It's seconded, Councillor Bowling. All those in favour of the suspension of standing orders? Against? Councillors Brown and Schreiber. I declare it carried. Councillor Miles, do you wish to move something?
Yes, I do. The words that are with the executive officer and which were circulated to councillors this evening prior to the council meeting.
It's seconded, Councillor Bowling. Councillor Miles has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would argue that this is actually one of the most important matters that we have to deal with tonight, even though there have been many worthy matters that have come into consideration. The issue that we have before us is that one of our number has, for almost the length of the term, as long as the asbestos issues have been in the public domain, failed to do her job, failed to carry out the functions of a councillor, failed to comply with repeated directions, lawful directions in my view. And when questioned on that 1 month ago at the last council meeting, gave answers that were vague, almost opaque. So what do we do with this situation, Mr. Mayor? What do we do with a councillor who is directed to return confidential documents and refuses? What do we do with a councillor who has made allegations, which as a result of a code of conduct process were found to be untrue, and was directed to apologise to two of her colleagues about whom she had said unacceptable things, but refuses to do that too? What do we do with a councillor who doesn't accept the outcomes of one of the most expensive and thorough inquiries in the history of local government in New South Wales? What do we do with a councillor who doesn't seem to accept the New South Wales Ombudsman's view, which chastised two state ministers and directed the state government to pay recompense to this council for its unacceptable actions? See, all through this, we have a councillor who did not hold back and wait to see whether the allegations were correct, as we all did, even though some of us who knew more than any, Mr. Mayor, were under extreme duress from the allegations that were made in the media. We held back. We did our job, but one of us did not do that. So now, what do? Do we say to the community, well, it's okay, she doesn't want to return documents, she doesn't want to comply with council resolutions, we just fold and we just say that's it? No, we turn away from that councillor and we say to the community, her actions were wrong, they are wrong, they remain wrong, and until she complies with the lawful directions of this council, she has no role in this place, in my view. And we need to say it. Now, we know the Office of Local Government has minimal ability to chastise councillors. We found that in the issue with the Supreme Court with Councillor Cornish of Penrith. Nevertheless, that's actually not really my point. The point is, what does this body of councillors say about the actions of this councillor? I asked a number of questions at the last council meeting. I asked why the documents had not been returned, why resolutions of the council had not been complied with. One word, gobsmacking word, unsubstantiated. Now, I think Councillor Brown may very well view these allegations as substantiated in her head, but Commissioner Beasley doesn't think that. The New South Wales Ombudsman doesn't think that. This council doesn't think that. And nobody who has heard all the facts would think that either. She referred to code of conduct as though that was the appropriate way, yet she's been the subject of a code of and hasn't complied with that either. So she asked to be held only by a code of conduct as the appropriate way of dealing with her actions, and yet will not comply with those also. Mr. Mayor, she essentially refused to answer the questions that were put to her at the last meeting about why she has not complied with the directions of this council, why she seems to feel by her actions that the law doesn't apply to her. The things that apply to all the rest of us apply. Many of us have been the subject of code of conduct allegations, and I take this moment to vent my extreme displeasure at the one that was put against myself. Nevertheless, I complied with its outcome, even though I utterly disagree with it and still do. because that's the rules, that's the system of government we have. And there is one councillor, Councillor Brown, who doesn't think that matters. And now we have the chance to say, yes, it does. And to the community, we say she has done wrong. She has not complied with the directions that were given to her. She thinks she doesn't have to, and we say no.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Any other councillors wish to speak? Does a seconder wish to speak?
Yes, I simply want to say that I completely agree with everything that Councillor Miles has said on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowling. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Brown, you seek the call?
Well, I suppose I should speak. I've just been attacked again.
The clock will start. Councillor Brown has the floor.
The most extraordinary thing about this is that Councillor Miles has said that I have sort of given vague answers and so on. He is forgetting that I was not at the meeting at which there was a general free-for-all on commentary about me. So how could I answer when I wasn't there? I replied very carefully at the last meeting to his comments about my obligations in terms of Supreme Court finding, and also in terms of the return of the reports, hundreds of pages of reports, that as far as I know, no other councillor asked to see them yet again after the reading through redacted reports by Mr. Cork. I took them home, hundreds of pages. I've used them as references. I believe I probably have one of the best understandings of what's gone on. I'm rather surprised that Councillor Miles thinks I don't accept the public inquiry findings. The public inquiry found that the council had been non-compliant for 5 years of the period investigated, non-compliant with the Work Health and Safety Act. I actually consider that, and maybe I'm alone in that, I consider that a serious matter. I consider it a serious matter that we have an enforceable undertaking because of the incidents at the Lawson depot and at the car park. And I sat through 30 days of many workers making submissions, of middle managers also. No one was suggesting those things didn't happen. It has been suggested recently that something that somehow Katoomba Tip was, well, the air was, tested not full of asbestos. There was no asbestos in the air. The testing was only ever done after the tip was closed and the machinery was no longer moving around the piles. So we've spent $5.5 million, and we still have, I understand, $1.5 to $2 million to spend on Katoomba Tip. As I have said, the Ombudsman's report found that 2 of the really minor sites of least risk, without doubt, in terms of the scale of what was happening, the Ombudsman's recommended some recompense, and he cited what he thought that should be, and SafeWork has followed through on that and offered $76,000, which I think is a correct amount. But it doesn't deal with the millions and millions that we've spent at Springwood, at Lawson, that we still have to spend, and I still have no answer on at the old Blackheath tip, and we're still going to have to spend at Katoomba. And, it's not about saying, we're all personally responsible, but we're the governing body. And I've always seen myself as part of that. And I have seen the fact that some of the incidents happened while I was a councillor. I do take that as part of my responsibility. It's not about blaming others. I'm actually saying I do wish that I had understood more and I'd asked more questions earlier. And there is no doubt in my mind that to be non-compliant on something as serious as asbestos, I mean, it's a huge killer. and it will continue to be a huge killer. It's something like 77 people a week die from asbestos-related diseases. You can't take it seriously enough. I mean, it's, from my point of view, these accusations that I have lied or I have told, I've gotten, where is the evidence of that? I have always spoken on behalf of the information I have, including from the community, including from families of workers affected. And I have followed very closely all the reports, all the tests. I noted at the public inquiry, the council managed to leave out a couple of the test results of Katoomba Tip. They were at the back of it, you could find them at the back of a later report, but they weren't there in the chronology. Maybe that's confused people as well. But I think as someone who's, I mean, I am actually—
The councillor's time has expired. Thank you. I'll ask that no, Councillor Brown, the clock did say your time had expired. So you can be surprised or not, but the clock doesn't lie. May I ask—
I'd like to comment on that.
No, Councillor Brown. May I ask the Deputy Mayor to please take the chair for a moment?
You have the chair. You have the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Let's actually look more broadly at what was alleged and what was said in those times. Let's not cherry pick. Jobs for the boys. Nope, didn't happen. Let me be clear. The enforceable undertaking would not have been supported by this council if we had had—
One of a point of order on that. You've just said jobs for the boys. What's that to do with me?
What's the point of order? Councillor Brown, what's the point of order? There's no point of order, Mr. Mayor. You can have the floor.
Yes, jobs for the boys didn't happen. The enforceable undertaking would not have been supported by this council if we had had the Ombudsman's report in our hands. It's simply a fact that we would not, the majority of us, would not have supported it. There were allegations made during the public inquiry about the CEO's recruitment, not upheld by the public inquiry. There are allegations made at the public inquiry about the culture of the council, not upheld by the public inquiry. There are allegations made that the 2012 and 2016 councils knew things, not upheld by the public inquiry. And tonight, we've had the Ombudsman's report being misrepresented again. Every single notice the Ombudsman reviewed was found to be either inappropriately issued or worse, unlawful. Not just that, but the Ombudsman took the extraordinary step of asking the agency to apologise, not just to the City of Blue Mountains, but to the community of the Blue Mountains for the trauma their behaviour caused. The Ombudsman's report showed that an enormous percentage of the activities of Safe Work that year were devoted to this council, and the Ombudsman's report named 2 ministers as having been involved in that and said that their influence was behind it. This was a significant report. Councillors were subjected, a couple of councillors, to comments publicly made that were not appropriate, and an investigation found that they weren't, and found that this councillor should apologise to those councillors. As we near the end of the term, that to this date hasn't happened. And let's not forget that the EPA declined any prosecution of this council. Why? Insufficient evidence. The fact is that we, as a council, have been put on a more difficult path by the conduct of one. And on the basis of that, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I will be supporting the censure motion tonight. I'll resume the chair. Does any other councillor? Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hollywood.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I have a question to the CEO.
Yes.
We are nearing the end of the council term. Indeed, our last council meeting is in the last week before the election. I have a question, which is, what actually is the requirement to return the documents, given that we cease to hold office on the 3rd, I think it is, of December? what is the requirement for the return of those documents, even though they've been required to be returned for some considerable time?
Yes, CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that the resolution of the council on this matter remains. Even after the council passes, the resolution is there, but we are seeking advice from the Office of Local Government on the status of these issues.
Yes, thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? No? Do I see any other hands up? All right. Councillor Miles, it has been spoken against.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's interesting that Councillor Brown said she accepted the results of the public inquiry, but the part about it clearing the governing body, I don't think that she accepts that at all, not by her actions. I don't think any of us could accept that statement. So she accepts the parts of the public inquiry that she likes, but not the ones that she disagrees with, which there are a substantial number, and which you, Mr. Mayor, have catalogued a few. She mentioned the answers that were given at the previous meeting. I don't regard them as answers, but I will quote what they were. In relation to the issue about the code of conduct, when I asked, why have you not complied with the code of conduct? Councillor Brown replied, I don't want to get into a lot of this. I don't think it is helpful to continue with showcasing. Well, I think it's really helpful to continue, if you want to call it showcasing or holding someone to account. And in fact, all councillors have a duty to hold each other to account, to hold the staff of this council, and to be held accountable ourselves by the community. But this is a councillor that doesn't think that that applies to her. And that was the answer that she gave. It was inconsequential, except it actually spoke volumes, that she just doesn't want to deal with these issues when they're brought up to her. And in fact, right through this term, have we not had more than a few points of order called when that very thing was attempting to be made? We also heard that I'm not going to recover the ground of the Ombudsman. It's all been said by other people. So what we heard is actually less important than what we didn't hear. Why I brought this forward tonight was to put these allegations directly to Councillor Brown, that she didn't do her job. She did not hold off, wait for all of the facts. In fact, she enabled those allegations, particularly those on 2GB and the Ray Hadley morning program. She dignified those, and some of those were revolting, some of those were extremely personal, Mr. Mayor, as we know, made by that broadcaster. But she didn't hold off. She didn't wait to see what on earth has been going on, what the staff had been doing. And she certainly doesn't accept the facts of the matter, which is that this council and previous councils are given directions to staff. They had funded those directions for staff to do all of the things around asbestos management that it needed to do. She's never accepted that, and she's never going to accept that. She's never going to accept that she is wrong and has been found wrong by the Commissioner Beasley, by the Ombudsman, Council Assisting, all of us around this table, and she's never going to accept that. And for that repeated misconduct, she deserves to be censured, and I move that way.
Yes, there's one matter before us. Its right of reply has been exercised. I'll put that matter. All those in
question. I have a question of Councillor Miles.
I'm in the process of putting the vote now. The time for asking questions has passed.
Miles.
Well, the time has passed. I'll put that matter. All those in favour? Councillors Bowling, Greenhill, Hollywood. Fernandez not in favour? Okay, Councillors Bowling, Fernandez is or isn't in favour? Okay.
She's frozen.
She's in favour. My hand's up. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
You're frozen.
Councillors Greenhill, Fernanda, Hollywood, Bowling, Vanderclay, McGregor, Miles, Fell. Councillor Hoare is out of the room, and by the way, was out of the room when the suspension of standing orders was moved as well, so should be noted as such. All those in favour, I've counted. All those against? Councillors Schreiber and Brown, with Councillor Christie out of the room along with Councillor Hoare. I declare the censure motion passed, and the councillor duly censured. Thank you, councillors. Now moving on to matters of urgency. The matter of urgency standing in the name of Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Fell, and that is about a pre-polling location being in Springwood for the election and not at Falconbridge. Councillor Miles, I do declare that it's urgent. It needs to be dealt with before the next council meeting. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all councillors are aware of the location of the Springwood pre-poll or proposed at Sir Henry's Parade near Corridor of Oaks, an extremely remote location, even from Falconbridge Station, which is the closest. There's no bus routes and limited ability for people who don't possess a vehicle to get there. What we need to do is empower people to vote, encourage them to vote, make it easy and obvious. And so for that, I'm pleased that the interactions I've had with council staff as we've tried to find a solution. We believe we have found one, which is the location of pre-poll at the Springwood Hub and Theatre in meeting room 1. And I would like to thank the staff who have gone to the next level in terms of interacting to find a solution for this, and I commend this motion to the council.
Thank you. The way I'm going to proceed is that if there's no opposition, I'm just simply going to put the matter without further speakers. So I take it there's no opposition to this. There being none, I'll put the matter. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Hua, in relation to a council meeting for November being in person with COVID rules applying, I declare that the matter is urgent because it has to be dealt with prior to the next council meeting, because that's the council meeting in question. It's moved Councillor Hua, seconded Councillor Hollywood. Councillor Hua has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, I believe that this is a really important statement of principle for our council to show some leadership and set an example to the rest of the community about the importance of being vaccinated and showing some responsibility in that regard. Lamentably, there appears to still be look, not a great amount of confusion, but a not trivial level of confusion, misinformation and resistance to getting fully vaccinated amongst some members of our community. And look, as someone who works in public high schools, I have very interacting with hundreds and hundreds of different people in close proximity every day. These are issues that I feel very deeply. I have spent a considerable effort during the course of this pandemic keeping on top of these issues. And while I certainly wouldn't claim to be an armchair epidemiologist, I do think I have a pretty high level of at least a layperson's knowledge of the threats that we still face. And this virus will be with us for a long time to come. That the best way we can protect our community, and particularly those under 12 who don't yet have vaccinations available to them, is to get ourselves vaccinated. And I do commend this motion to the council, and I look forward to everybody's support. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak?
No.
No. Councillor Hollywood doesn't wish to speak. Any other councillor wish to speak?
I've got a question.
Councillor Brown with a question.
Are we having a public meeting in November? I thought
we will be, yes.
I thought it was going to be on Zoom.
It won't be. If we can help it. I mean, if there's any prohibition to having it in public, of course we won't, but assuming the public health order allows it, we'll be having it in public. That will mean, as Councillor Hoare points out, that people will have to show vaccination certificates to attend. However, if any can't do that, we'll allow for them to Zoom in, so have a hybrid meeting. Any other questions on this matter? Councillor Fernanda wishes to speak.
Just very briefly on this, I think no matter what anyone's personal views are regarding with vaccination and proof of, I think the optics for us to have anyone
I need to turn her video off.
Councillor
Double vaccinated.
Fernanda, we can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
Okay, you can't hear me at all?
No, you're dropping out. Just we're hearing every 10th word, so we might not persist.
Turn your video off.
Try turning your video off and see if it works.
Okay.
Okay,
Can you
try
hear
again.
me now?
A bit better. Have a go.
Okay, is that a little bit better?
Only a bit.
Yes? All right. Well, I'll just say briefly if you can hear me. When we're required to show double vaccination, even just go into, Woolworths or anywhere, I think it would look quite hypocritical of us if we walk into the chamber and ourselves don't prove that we've had double vaccination. So no matter what people's personal view, if the public is expected and we are expected to show double vaccination just to go into a grocery shop, really, I don't think that we can just roll in without showing proof of vaccination. I think that's quite hypocritical of us.
Thank you, Councillor, and we did get that. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brown.
I support the motion.
I just have a question. What I'm not clear on is it the case that people have, isn't it already the case that people have to show double vax to come into the chamber or not?
It is.
It is the case.
It is.
So why are we voting on it?
Well, because Councillor Hoare has put up a motion to ensure the rules are complied with.
But that's really
Well, the simple answer is because I ruled it's urgent.
even though we're doing it anyway.
I've ruled it's urgent and it's important for that to be put on the public record. I'm sure no one will have any difficulty complying. There should be no contention. Any other councillors wish to speak? There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Hollywood, matter relating to the removal of the Woodford Bridge. It does require attention before the next council meeting. It's moved, Councillor Hollywood, seconded the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Hollywood has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that Councillor Hoare has sent through a very late amendment. I'm a bit confused where it seems to have bobbed up at 9:15. So I don't know whether everybody's seen it.
Yes, continue.
I'm happy to take it on board as a point 2C.
Okay, Councillor Hoare, that's taken on board as a point 2C.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hollywood.
Yeah, and your support for the proposition is noted, Councillor Hoare, because I won't be taking further speakers if there's no opposition.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm hoping that this is fairly self-explanatory, but it is heartbreaking to hear, and it took 3 weeks for the letter to actually be drafted by Transport for New South Wales or their officers of one of their departments, and then arrive at the council chambers. I mean, we know that Australia Post is a little slow, but really 3 weeks is pretty extraordinary. We're about to hit a caretaker mode. So again, it would have been good to have been able to have a full council report, but this simply just is not the time. And so I really thank the council officers for giving us this opportunity to bring this before the council to express our extreme opposition to this proposal to remove this historic bridge that is used in Woodford as a link between North and South Woodford, between the heritage listed items of the Woodford Memorial Park and the Woodford Memorial, and across to Wilson's Glen. The other point is that, in fact, the bridge itself is heritage listed. It is a real concern that the state government and its agencies shows such utter disregard for our community, for our planning processes, for our local heritage register, for our engagement with our community, and for the voice and the lived experience of our community. It is an absolute disgrace. And I will be, along with, I believe, my Ward 2 colleagues, absolutely standing shoulder to shoulder with our community to fight this one. And I appreciate the support that we've had from the council over many years. To see this bridge potentially go is heartbreaking. But the other thing I will point to, and what's really critical in this motion, is that the last time this came before the council, I referred in detail to the REF that actually made some costings, some ballpark costings around what it would cost to replace the bridge. And those costings, I believed at the time, were basically pulled out of thin air and that they were not appropriate. I was quoted in the paper as saying the Bullaburra Bridge, that giant bridge that I didn't support, pedestrian bridge, cost about 3 million. They were saying to build a bridge down, the little pedestrian bridge, footbridge over Woodford, is going to cost around 10. I haven't had time to check the figures, but it was something of that order. How on earth? So one of the things that I think we need to do is actually call for all of those detailed costings, all of the material that was used to inform that decision to be revealed. I actually think there's something that stinks about this. And I think that it is an example of a lack of probity, a lack of due diligence, and a lack of transparency. And if I'm re-elected, I will continue to pursue this matter. But I'm really proud that at least now, tonight, we're able to bring this motion forward, and at least our council, our operational staff, can take this forward on our behalf. I really thank you, and I hope this motion will be fully supported.
Yes, thank you. There's no opposition to this, I take it? All right, noting the support of the Ward 2 councillors, I'll put this. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried, I believe, unanimously. Final matter is Councillor Christie, bike racks in Glenbrook, noting the safety issue involved. I declare that it is urgent and can't wait till the next council meeting. Let's move Councillor Christie, seconded Councillor Bowling. Councillor Christie has the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, this was raised by a resident of Glenbrook today. And when I visited him on site, he showed me, it was very clear the pedestrian issue of when cyclists are waiting outside of Con's Cafe, for example, for their coffee with their cycle, blocking the minimal footpath, and a bus showing up and pedestrians getting off the bus. There is a very busy footpath, and users were actually walking on the road to get around bikes, and there is just a clear pedestrian issue there. And it was suggested by the resident that we look at installing bike racks around Glenbrook Park for users to leave their bikes there, then go to the shops, which would reduce the traffic on the footpath around the shops, and encourage more people to cycle into Glenbrook rather than drive their cars. Thanks. That was all.
Thank you, Councillor Christie. There's no opposition to this, I take it. Therefore, I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Executive Officer, there's no further business to transact, is there? No. CEO?
No, Mr. Mayor, there isn't.
All right. I'll then take a motion to close the meeting. It's moved Councillor Christie, seconded Councillor Fell.
Sorry.
All those in favour?
Sorry, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, there's 2 confidential items.
Oh, apologies.
I think they were dealt with in Globo.
They were approved in Globo, I think, Jasmine.
Yeah,
Just check.
Yeah, I called. Refer me to the items, Jasmine.
You've got 13.
Yes, I
and
called
18.
that, and I called that. I called both of those as moved in Globo.
Yeah.
Record
Thank you.
will reflect. So it's moved. Councillor Christie, seconded Councillor Fell. We close the meeting. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. I bid you all a fond good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, Nigel.
Thanks, Toby.
Thanks, Jasmine.